It'll be helpful for us now to take a quick half step back and think a little bit about ritual. We made some commentaries in the beginning opening lecture talking about how important the establishment of rituals in honor of the gods are in these Homeric hymns, and we're going to see that in many of them, ritual activity is actually built into the mythic narrative. Well, in the broader scheme of things, rituals and myths are intimately connected. And we're going to find this focus on the Homeric hymns gives us a chance to draw up these connections and look at how these two areas are quite interestingly and mutually illuminating of each other. One quick note on terminology before we get started. We're going to use the word cult in this class to mean just ritual activity at all. So anytime we talk about human beings worshiping divinities, we're going to use the word cult for the activity that they're engaged in. Ritual for us is going to be labeled as cult. Now, this is not a value judgment term. The term in English, cult, sometimes has a very specific kind of definition of a splinter, non-standard group that may be doing something out of the ordinary. That's not at all how we use it when scholars refer to ancient ritual activity. We'll talk about cult in honor of Athena, or cult in honor of Dionysus, or whatever it happens to be. It's a standard term in our field. Value neutral, that labels ritual activity, any rites performed in honor of a god. We don't know a lot about specific religious rituals across the board in antiquity. There's not a lot of information about how specific rituals worked. We do have some windows in to one or the other of these. What we'll be reading with the Homeric hymn to Demeter gives us a very close-up look of the Eleusinian mysteries. It's one of the cultic practices whose details we know something about, but for the most part, we don't know a lot of details about any individual religious cult. We know some things about them in general. They're very important in each city. The cities themselves have a civic component to their religious activity. To worship the god or goddess that is the patron of the city is also an expression of civic collectiveness and being together, having a sense of identity as a Spartan or as an Athenian or whatever it might happen to be. There is also a linkage between the calendration, so the months of the year, such as they unfold according to the normal cycle of seasons, and religious festivals and activities. So the calendration, our understanding of time in our city, is linked to our practice of religious cult. These festivals can be in honor, will be in honor of a god. They could be in special locations, sometimes in the civic center, sometimes far away. A long day's walk, maybe even 2 or 3 days walk, can be cast outside of the normal environs of the city, giving us an open space in which we can engage in something that's a little bit out of the ordinary for our normal civic life. Ritual activities, there are many that are common in antiquity. There is the act of purification. So in order to get engaged in an activity, before we engage in ritual action, we've got to clean ourselves. That could mean in a river, in any piece of water, any body of water, an ablution that helps wash away whatever impurities might be on us. We may then put on special clothing that's a certain kind of clean and not normally used in everyday life kind of clothing. We have processions, as indicated here in our wonderful frieze located currently in the British Museum. We have processions where we'll have a dedication, a long march of us all together walking up to a temple or an altar, and some dedication given to the god. There will be fasting that's involved at different points in the ritual calendar. There might be fasting that leads into ritual activity, fasting during ritual activity, or after. There are certain kinds of foods that we may associate with these ritual actions. There'll be some kind of special drink or food that we only eat during certain times that are connected with our ritual action. One focus that generally shows up in ancient cult is the practice of sacrifice. You can see our poor bull here behind me getting some nasty treatment from the human beings that are surrounding him. Yes, indeed, the ancient Greeks did practice live sacrifice. They would take animals, the larger the mammal, the better, and give the animal a special kind of preparation, making it go through a certain kind of purification. There may be particular kinds of decoration that are attached to the animal. The animal is then led to an altar and ritually slaughtered. Where it's cut open, it is killed in honor of the divinity. At that point, you and I then would carve up the meat and share it out and have a chance of having a large, protein-rich dinner in honor of a god. We would give the god a certain kind of sacrifice. We've already discovered from Hesiod's Theogony that we know what that is. Thigh bones wrapped in fat. That's what apparently the gods want. You and I get to keep the good stuff for ourselves. We can eat the meat and the entrails and all the rich food from the animal ourselves. Cows are the sort of best of the kind of sacrifice a person could give. Bulls, oxen, the larger ones, the better. But there are other things that are sacrificed that are appropriate sacrifices to the gods, including things like sheep or goats, pigs also. Piglets are there, they're very cheap, so is poultry. You can sacrifice that to a god. Typically, it's not the case that the ancients would have sacrificed fish. They didn't really do that. Other kinds of birds they didn't really do either. If it is a bird, it would be something like poultry. The things that a god likes to eat map on pretty closely to things that you and I like to eat. At the end of this ceremony comes the consumption. There could also be non-animal sacrifices. We could sacrifice grains, first fruits. We pour out ablutions to the gods, pouring out wine, water, milk, whatever it might be. In the sacrifice, it's a curious kind of custom to imagine that the gods want us to kill animals. That's strange. It's not idiosyncratic to the Greeks. It's actually common all around the ancient Mediterranean and in other parts of the Old World as well. There are generally different kinds of customary explanations for why this activity is engaged in. As anthropologists in the contemporary world have looked back on the ritual, some suggestions have been made as to why this thing might be done. Why is it that we, as Greeks, engage in the killing of a live animal? Why do our gods want us to do this? There's a clear indication here that there's a demand by the god that such a thing be done. And there's been a suggestion among contemporary scholars that one thing that's happening is that human beings are transferring whatever guilt they might feel at killing a live animal and consuming its flesh. They're transferring that guilt onto the gods. You know, the gods made us do it. We have to kill this thing. Now that we've killed it and given the bones and the fat to the god, all this leftover meat, well, we might as well eat that too. There's a possibility here that there's a kind of blood guilt that humans feel at killing and eating animals, and so we enlist the gods to help us explain why it is that we do it. The thematics of the sacrifice are pretty clear. We're killing an animal, and that killing of the animal reinforces its mortality, may also remind us of our own, and sets all of us, humans and animals and the rest of us that are destined to live these terrestrial lives, in strong contrast to those Olympian divinities that live forever and ever. So the death of the sacrifice confirms by contrast the deathlessness of the gods to whom we sacrifice. Then also at the end of the sacrifice, we mentioned this in 2 earlier classes. In fact, when we talked about Hesiod and also in Homer, you and I get a chance to share some yummy kind of meat. So we get a chance to dig into some really extraordinary foodstuffs. Those you and I who are living on grain-based diets, we ancient Greeks. Also, wine is an important part of the sacrifice, or of the ritual. There may be some poured out on the altar. We'll see some wine that gets poured out as a libation, but we'll also have wine that's consumed. In the rites of Dionysus, this wine is consumed to utter excess, to the point where a person is drunken in an almost violent way, extreme and completely out of their mind. This was part of what the ritual was all about, as depicted here on a lovely amphora. We see that kind of thing is going to happen. It's typical in all ancient ritual that wine is a part of it. Excessive drunkenness is actually perfectly acceptable in ancient religious contexts. Excessive drunkenness, such as we see in Dionysiac cults, though, is idiosyncratic to Dionysus. We'll also see this examples, as we see here, we have an example of the pouring out of libations on top of an altar. Such a thing is going to happen as the wine becomes a part of the sacrifice too. Now we're going to see grand events that happen around festivals. There'll be theatrical performances built into religious festivals, such as would happen here at our lovely Theater of Dionysus. There are also going to be games built into religious sacrifices, songs, contests of all kinds. It's likely, but we're not absolutely sure of this context, but it's likely that it is within these festival and religious contexts that the hymns would have been originally performed. So when we have a long weekend festival in honor of Athena, and there are games and feasts and festivals, sacrifices, drinking, all in her honor, we would have a closing off ceremony where there would be some, or at least some moment during the ceremony, where there would be some singing in honor of a god or a goddess, and a hymn would have been a very appropriate form for that to be. As I say, we're not 100% certain of that context, but it seems to stand to reason that this ritual activity is going to be built into not just the thematics of the stories that we see, but also into the modes by which they were performed and heard by the ancient audiences.